Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back from CNN, Samuel Burke and his panel.
Good morning, another CNNer. It's great for me to be up here just after John Defterios. I worked as his producer, and now we get a chance to share the stage occasionally. We're going to be talking about fintech up here and what it means for the financial markets, what it means for the Gulf region. So I want to start by introducing the panel. We'll go one by one, first starting with Dilip Rao. He's the Global Head of Infrastructure and Innovation for Ripple, based in New York now. Then to his left, we have Bernard Louis Roch, who's the General Partner and Co-founder of Truffle. And then we have His Excellency Rashid Al-Maraj, the Governor of the Central Bank here in Bahrain. Abdulaziz Al-Jouf, who is the CEO of PayTabs, which I'm sure many people know out here. And then lastly, Ori Despo, who's a researcher and co-founder at Aurelius. So I just want to start by asking, what do you think is the big disruptor for the fintech markets? What do you think is the one technology that's going to change things dramatically? Is it blockchain?
As a venture capitalist with 17 years of experience, I think we're experiencing an incredible moment. It's not just blockchain, it's a global disruption with digitalization of everything that relates to financial industry, but also changes in regulation on a worldwide basis. So what has happened in the and with the advent of internet 20 years ago, I think is probably going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years.
You're the regulator here. So do you take a view on this type of thing? Do you look at it and say, oh, this is the one that's coming the quickest, this is the biggest change that I already see? Or are you agnostic? You sit back and you look and whatever comes, comes?
Well, I think my job as a regulator is not to predict what technology is going to influence the direction of the market. I think my job as a regulator is to create the right environment for any technology to serve the industry in a more reasonable way. Predicting what will happen is a very difficult business.
And does it make you nervous? I mean, we're in a time of great change. Do you want to be the one who embraces that change? The more change, the better. Is more change difficult for a government, any government, not just Bahrain?
Let me share with you what went through us when we started looking at fintech. I think the biggest hurdle for us was the fear factor. For any regulators to think about changes in the landscape sometimes brings a lot of anxiety, because naturally any regulator would like to have stability, would like to have certainty in our work, so that we don't create any kind of risk that could create financial instability. But what we decided in the Central Bank of Bahrain, this coming technology is of immense benefits to the economy of Bahrain. And that's why we took the dive into this. We made the regulations that is necessary for the fintech industry, and we pushed the industry in Bahrain to start looking at this and starting introducing the changes that we think it will help the industry and the economy at large.
I was going to say, one of the best examples that I've seen, I was just in Dubai, and to get your college transcripts when you need to get them to another university or to your employer, that's always incredibly difficult. And I saw a Canadian company that's working with Dubai's universities to make it so that everybody is using the same blockchain system, the same system that underpins cryptocurrencies, to make it so that anybody can get your college transcripts. And I think this is a really easy, tangible way to understand blockchain. Do you have a better definition than we have, Bernard?
In a few words, I would say it's a decentralized distributed ledger protocol.
Decentralized being the important word there.
There's no one single authority that controls it, so it decentralized, distributed ledger to which people can refer as a ledger. And as a consequence, it's a protocol on which we can buy systems and solutions. And these systems and solutions are in some ways revolutionary because they provide a way to address and tackle issues that are not addressed properly today.
Bernard, you have the governor of the Central Bank of Bahrain sitting right next to you, and he seems open. We were talking before, he wants to hear what people have to say. What do you think the role of regulators should be in fintech? Sometimes when I look at blockchain, I don't see any room for regulation because it is decentralized, as you were just saying. So is there a role for the central bank here in Bahrain, for example, to play in blockchain and fintech? Or is this about eliminating those institutions?
I don't think blockchain has to be regulated as a blockchain. It's what you can do with it. It's the application. And what's happening with a regulation in fintech in general, it's not just blockchain, it's been happening over the past 5 years, is a radical change where digitalization is changing the name of the game. So that is what's happening on a worldwide basis. And what I see is that regulators are tackling the changes in very different ways across the geographies. If you take the example of sandbox, there is a sandbox here in Bahrain. There isn't a sandbox in many geographies. If you take the example of Europe, it's been handled in a certain way by the FCA in the UK with 2 rows of sandbox trials. And then in Eastern Europe, you have Estonia, Lithuania, and Luxembourg is somewhat trying to do that. Germany is not in favor of that. In France, they have a different approach. They think that many things, many services can be actually developed with a very simple license. So what I've seen is regulators play a fundamental role, and I've been very impressed with my new experience with Bahrain. It was mentioned yesterday by Chief Executive of EDB, what the Team Bahrain approach. It is my experience. Since I first met the Bahrain representatives in Paris FinTech Forum in January, we've been able to see that it's not just about regulation, it's about being able to access the bankers, the representatives of the development, and all the stakeholders in the ecosystem. If you just have one single initiative, it doesn't work. It's the whole ecosystem. That's really a team work on a global pace. And the advantages is that when you can move that forward with a team that is proactive, then you can handle it.
So
it is important for us with a view that we will allow and encourage and promote fintech. But at the same time, I would like the people who are involved in this technology to understand that the regulators have certain responsibilities when it comes to the protection of consumer rights, the KYC issues. You know, the recent story or fiasco about data being used by Facebook created a serious challenge to governments and regulators and know how to ensure that with the technology penetrating in details of our lives, at the end of the day must be certain caps to protect consumer affairs, consumer interest, and at the same time provide certain safety. And I think this is where we have to be very careful and know not to expect that the regulator will turn a blind eye about this kind of behavior.
Bernard?
Yes, I think it is extremely important. And just as the fintech and the global financial industry is being changed and disrupted, I think there is a global change in regulation as well. And the regulators are very much impacted. As you are referring to data protection, you know that in Europe, within 2 weeks from now, there will be the GDPR implemented throughout the territory.
We've heard a lot about Facebook and Google having to comply with this European regulation now.
Absolutely. And what is very interesting is that the philosophy of each and every regulator is very different. And in Europe, you will have the, regulators that have a very slow motion type of reaction to the changes. So the categories, like defining fintechs with categories, crowd lending, alternative lending, insurtech, are already obsolete. And on top of that, there are supra-regulators. The EBA, European Banking Association, wants to develop a sandbox with a European regulation, but at the moment they are relocating from London to Paris, so they don't exactly know how they should do that. What I would like to say is eventually what is important, and not all regulators will be able to do that, is the interaction, the dialogue. I feel that when you are actually talking to the fintechs themselves, then you're making the right steps, you're doing the right thing, and not all regulators will do that. Sometimes it takes 3 months to make an appointment, and because you don't feel into a predefined category, they won't know how to regulate you. So dialogue is eventually the ultimate business model for regulators, and I'm convinced that it's going to happen, but at different paces.
Okay, that's the positive, but Bernard, is there potential for negative? What could be a negative side of blockchain and money laundering? Could it make it more difficult?
Well, it's maturing. The market is maturing. It's just like a bit like cyber security. The technologies for protecting, the technologies for security are improving every day. So anti-money laundering technologies are progressing. However, I don't think it's a fair statement to say that we will eliminate money laundering, just as we will not eliminate threats in cyber security. It's progressing, so it's becoming more and more hard. It's becoming more, you have to be more and more sophisticated, if I may say so.
Bernard, what do you think that they can do in the Gulf to keep this innovation moving faster? It's a competition, really, to see which country, which region, which city can out-innovate the other.
It's a new industry, the fintech industry, so I think there is a room for places in the world to become leaders and hubs. And in my experience, I've been extremely interested, and I would say attracted, and this is a reason why I have come here, not just for the conference, but also for everything that's happening in Bahrain. In a matter of several days, you can meet representatives of the banks, of the authorities. It's easy to set up a company, and also there's a willingness and commitment to develop fintech. So that's how you create a hub, and a hub will have an international dimension. So of course it will serve the Gulf, but my belief is that if the investment is carried on in the coming, in the very short term, there is room to create a financial and fintech hub that will have a global reach, and beyond the Gulf, attract talents. We've seen companies that are able to set up shop here in a matter of months and attract talents. So you can do that. So that's what is interesting. That's why I'm here. I'm sort of very fascinated by it.
I mean, this is an evolving industry, and I can tell you that maybe for the first time, the GCC governors decided to have a fintech dedicated teams. And this issue is becoming a permanent issue on the agenda of every meeting of the GCC governors. This reflects the interest from the wider markets here in the GCC to move forward with the fintech industry and facilitate the adoption of fintech industry within our sector. For us in Bahrain, in a span of 1 year, I have seen huge change in mindset of the industry. When we started last year promoting fintech and asking the bank to become more friendly, so to speak, there was a little bit of hesitation. And I think the message from the central bank that if you are not going to do it, we'll bring people from outside to do it. So now, after we made so many steps, the sandbox, the fintech bay, and the regulations, I see more and more interest from the banks to start to have a share of this evolving industry. So I would expect in the next few months, we will see more active and rigorous movements towards new ideas, new interests, not necessarily related to the banking industry, but to the insurance, to probably non-bank institutions.
It's certainly great to hear, Governor. Appreciate that.
Before we wrap up the panel, I just want to remind everybody you have the Gateway Golf app to keep track of what panels are coming up next. You've got social media, which will be up there in a second. You can use the hashtags on Instagram and Twitter. And today we're going to have lunch sponsored by Kuwait. Dilip, Bernard, His Excellency, Abdulaziz, Ori, thank you very much for joining us on the panel today.
Thank you.